So thanks for having me. I'm Andrea Harrington. I'm joined here with Brian House, who is our Director of Community Engagement. How the DA's office works, obviously, we're responsible for prosecuting state crime here in Berkshire County. That's our jurisdiction. The priority of our office really has been to get the focus on aggressive investigation and prosecution of violent crime, and to be joined together with the community and being problem solvers around, crime that is related to substance use disorder, mental illness, poverty. We have really taken a leadership role in addressing the scourge of racism in the courts, which you see, I think, both in terms of how victims are perceived and treated in the system, but also in terms of Black and Latinx defendants being policed, over prosecuted, and receiving harsher sentences than their white counterparts. Some of the things, my accomplishments that I'm proud of that I think relates to this topic in particular, and one of our greatest accomplishments, I think, has been our work around just what we don't do, and that is not prosecuting lower level misdemeanor offenses. We have a presumption in the office to not prosecute low level non-victim crimes like possession of drugs, low-level shoplifting, operating without a driver's license. Once somebody gets their license restored, we dismiss those charges. So we're going to be sharing some information soon publicly that kind of shows how our philosophy around prosecution is having a real world impact. And I want you to know, there are thousands of people over the past several years that have avoided just getting caught up in the justice system, fines, fees, penalties, jail time. I'm really proud of that work and the work that we've done. We still have a long way to go for sure. We have worked to improve our accessibility to victims of crime. We've hired Spanish-speaking victim advocates, Spanish-speaking forensic interviewer. Those are the people who interview children who are victims of crime. There were no Spanish speakers in this office when I took office. We've incorporated a language line for our victim witness advocates to use. Now, our big project that we're working on with the Wilson Center at Duke Law School is our plea tracker project. There was a study that came out that was commissioned by Chief Justice Gantz, who was the late Chief Justice of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. That was a study done by Harvard University that showed that Black defendants received sentences that were on average 168 days longer than their white counterparts. Latinx people received sentences that were 148 days longer, even when you controlled for all different kinds of variables. And a lot of those cases are resolved by plea. 95% of cases are resolved by plea. So we're working with the Wilson Center on a study that's really the first of its kind, and it is a detailed survey that we fill out on every case that is disposed of by a plea. And it's all kinds of things, like what the prosecutor's thinking was, how much contact we had with the victim, what their participation was, how much contact we had with the defense counsel, did the judge alter our requests? So this is going to give us some really, really rich data around how we're treating people who are pleading out to their cases. Those are just kind of some of the big innovations. Gwendolyn and I are both on the U.S. Attorney's Office Civil Rights Task Force. I'm the co-chair of the law enforcement group. And what really motivated me to seek out this particular responsibility was, an event that Bridge hosted. It was for Martin Luther King Day, and it was very powerful. It was a listening session, and we heard from the community, and I'd certainly heard this before, but it really impacted me. We heard from the community around the feelings of anxiety and fear that people are experiencing due to increases in hate incidents and hate crimes here in Berkshire. This is something that we have to change, and we certainly hear from victims who are afraid to go to law enforcement, and that's obviously been a big issue everywhere. I think in Williamstown, certainly been more vocal and shine a light on that, but it is a problem throughout the county. So I really want to work with law enforcement to build relationships in the community so that people do feel that if they come forward, they will be treated with compassion and with dignity, and that law enforcement will follow up. And One of my favorite things about my position is the police that I work with. We have wonderful police officers that work in the district attorney's office, and we have wonderful officers across the county. I think that we also have officers who, need some education and they need some training. And so we want to work to give the officers the tools that they need to build those relationships. Part of the work of the law enforcement part of the Civil Rights Task Force is to provide that training. Other things that we've done in the office is really on a case-by-case basis. We've dismissed cases, a lot of cases that are like resisting arrest, and a lot of assault and battery on a police officer. And we've gotten really good cooperation from individual officers because we do, in any case where there's a victim, we consult with the victim in terms of our decision making. And we have gotten really good cooperation on that. We've dismissed a number of cases because of, traffic stops or other kinds of stops that just were questionable under the law and could appear to be racially motivated. We've gotten good cooperation in terms of those kinds of decisions from law enforcement, but I would like to have a more comprehensive policy and strategy and training around our law enforcement in making traffic stops. We did a wonderful training with Chris Henning, who is a professor from Georgetown. She does a training that's very research, social sciences driven training that goes through the literature and the research as to how routine policing impacts people of color. And it was very similar to the sexual assault training that we did. We did a sexual assault training where we taught officers how trauma impacted a victim's behavior. And a victim might not act in a way that you would anticipate, and that's a trauma response. It really very similar for people of color in the community that are interacting with law enforcement. And she had studies that showed that for people who are watching these images of the murder of Black people at the hands of police officers on TV creates a trauma response for people, even just seeing it on TV. And so her training was really powerful and explained why people run from the police, why they might consent to a search, why they might behave nervously or in furtive gestures. Like, it was a very practical training, and we did that for my office and with DPCS, but it really was a very powerful training. And it had real world results. We had a prosecutor on there and a defense attorney on there. They had a case, and it was like they used their training and their skills to come up with a fair resolution, and the case was dismissed. Another thing that we've adopted is around jury selection. I think that this is kind of a great story from a case Friday in Northern Berkshire District Court. We've adopted a policy that we do not ask race-based questions during jury selection. So typically for thousands of trials, probably for, I don't know how many years, 100 years, maybe longer, lawyers during jury selection would ask potential jurors if they felt that the system was unfair to people of color. And if they said yes, it's a basis potentially for disqualifying them from jury service. So we have stopped asking them. We had a case on in North Adams, and there was a young man of color who was on the panel. He wrote on the bottom of his form, I'm paraphrasing here, but something along the lines of, I think the system is unfair to people of color. And the defendant was a young woman of color. She was about 22 years old. She was being prosecuted for operating under the influence. The judge saw that. He excused him from service, and the prosecutor she said, "Judge, can I see you at sidebar?" The judge, the prosecutor, the defense attorney went to sidebar, and the prosecutor said, "Judge, this juror has a well-founded belief that the justice system unfairly targets people of color. I don't see that as being a reason why he can't serve on the jury. This is a reasonable belief." And so the judge changed his mind, let him back on the jury, said, "Sorry, that was a mistake. You can be on the jury." It was not guilty. It wasn't a great case. And afterwards, the judge thanked her for that. So to me, that's like one of my favorite stories I've heard in a long time. We have a racial justice group that's led by Judge Page. She's a retired Superior Court judge from Hampden County. She is a Black woman. She was a defense attorney. She was a prosecutor for many years. And so we're looking at these kinds of policies. We want to kind of take our practices and put them into written policies. So she's helping us with that. We're looking at how we make charging decisions, how we use sentencing enhancements, looking for coded language in police reports. There's a lot there. I said a lot. I'm happy to take questions, but thanks for having me.